Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping right in today with a question that feels, well, timeless. It was posed ages ago, but it still hits home. If stepping back, if renouncing action is supposed to be the higher path, then why engage in action? Why fight, for instance?
hmm
It really makes you question the value of all our efforts, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It gets right to how we see our place in the world and whether, what we do actually matters from maybe a bigger perspective.
Exactly. And that's our mission for this deep dive, to explore the perspective in Gita for Joyful Living. We're focusing specifically on chapter 5, verses 3 through 12.
Right.
These verses tackle this really interesting idea that action and inaction might not be opposites. The text calls it the oneness of action and inaction.
The core concept there.
Now, I get it. This can sound a bit abstract, maybe even a little overwhelming if these ideas are new to you.
hmm
But stick with us. We're going to try and unpack it in a way that's clear, hopefully engaging, and maybe leads to some of those aha moments.
Well, what's fascinating from the start is how the text handles this apparent contradiction. It basically says that those who are wise, they perceive reality differently. They see the created world, everything physical, as constant action, constant change.
Okay, constant action.
But they see consciousness, fundamental awareness, as constant inaction, stillness. And the key thing is they aren't confused by this. They don't see it as a conflict.
Okay, let me try to grasp that. So, the world moving, changing, that's action. But our inner awareness, the part of us that just is, that's the inaction, the observer.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
Yeah.
The text gives an example like someone just doing natural things, eating, sleeping, breathing, daily life. While these are definitely actions, the wise person understands that on the deepest level, the level of the self, the Atman, they aren't the doer.
Ah, okay.
The Atman itself, it doesn't act and it doesn't cause action. It's a subtle shift in perspective, but really profound.
Wow, okay. So, even when I'm busy doing things, working, whatever, there's a part of me that's just watching.
That's the idea presented here.
How does that actually play out? How does it affect how the wise live?
Well, according to the text, this understanding means their external life, what job they have, their specific lifestyle, it becomes sort of secondary to their inner experience of joy.
Secondary how?
Because they've grasped this fundamental truth, they aren't driven by obligation in the same way or by feeling like something is missing. Internally, they've reached their destination, so to speak.
Arrived at their destination internally. That sounds like a really deep sense of peace, something not dependent on what happens outside.
Exactly. Their understanding, their intelligence, the text says, is grounded in knowing that the only truly real, unchanging thing is this witnessing, joyful self.
Okay.
And they see all beings, all life, not as separate, isolated units, but as interconnected, part of this constantly shifting, evolving whole.
Does that mean they pull back from the world then? If they have this inner peace?
Not necessarily. That's the interesting part. The text suggests their inner state is stable regardless of outer activity. Their minds are focused on that deeper truth, so they aren't constantly chasing sensory pleasures.
Mm-hmm.
They might experience pleasure, sure, but there's no deep attachment. They aren't elated when it's there or devastated when it's gone.
So someone considered wise could be running a business, raising a family, fully engaged, but inside they maintain this awareness, this sense of not being the ultimate actor. It's like participating fully, but without being tied to the results.
That captures it really well.
Yes.
The text even suggests their actions can be seen as almost facilitating the experiences of others, like they're playing their part in the larger flow of things. And because these actions aren't coming from a place of selfish desire or big personal plans, they don't create those binding consequences, the karma, in the same way.
Okay, that paints a clearer picture of how the wise might see action and inaction as unified. But you mentioned the text says this isn't how everyone sees it, right? It talks about 6 different categories of people.
Exactly. This is where it gets really practical, I think. It acknowledges that people are at very different stages of understanding, different levels of knowledge, and that affects how they perceive action and inaction.
Okay, let's walk through these. We've covered the first category, the wise. What about the second group?
The second category is described as people who have conviction, but maybe not the full direct knowledge yet. They've seen through the limitations of just chasing material things.
They've hit a wall with that approach.
Kind of. They've experienced that worldly success doesn't bring lasting fulfillment, and they believe the answer lies elsewhere in spiritual pursuits. So for them, the text actually recommends renouncing outward action.
Really? Okay.
Yes, focusing instead on a spiritual lifestyle, studying, self-reflection, gaining self-knowledge. For this group, renunciation is presented as the beneficial path.
Interesting. So they feel the pull towards something deeper and are encouraged to follow it by stepping back. What's the third category like?
This group is almost the opposite in a way. They intellectually understand the ultimate knowledge. They get the philosophy.
They've read the books, maybe.
Perhaps, yes. They understand it conceptually. But their minds are still very much drawn to worldly pleasures and attachments. There's a gap between what they know and what they feel drawn to.
Ah, the head knows, but the heart isn't quite there yet.
Precisely. So for them, the recommendation is also a form of renunciation, specifically. Renouncing distracting outward actions in favor of practices like meditation. The goal is to quiet the mind, to bring it into alignment with their intellectual understanding.
Okay, so they need inner work to bridge that gap. Now, the fourth category sounds quite different.
It is. This group is described as lacking sufficient mental maturity or self-knowledge. For these individuals, the text strongly advises against renouncing action,
Against it. Why?
because action is seen as necessary for their growth. Specifically, karma yoga acting without attachment to the results. The idea is that through performing actions selflessly, they gradually develop the mental stability and clarity they need.
So action becomes the training ground for them. The text mentions even karma yoga needs some self-knowledge. How does that fit?
It suggests it's not just any action. It requires a conscious shift in motivation. Instead of acting just for personal gain, you start acting with a focus on the action itself, letting go of the outcome. That takes some awareness, some effort to detach from selfish drives.
Right.
You can keep acting, but without that craving for results until they gain more understanding and that inner conviction grows.
That makes sense. It's a gradual purification through action. What about category 5?
Category 5 describes people who are, well, perhaps mistaken about the goal itself. They think true happiness lies in material things, or status, or external achievements.
So they're chasing the wrong thing.
According to this perspective, yes. Their goals keep shifting. They're always looking for the next thing outside themselves. For them, renouncing action isn't really on the table because their desires constantly push them towards more action, more acquisition.
They're caught in that cycle. What's the guidance for them?
It's interesting. The text suggests incorporating prayer or devotion alongside their pursuits. The idea is that this can help them achieve success in their worldly goals, which they value.
Okay.
But it also subtly starts to orient them towards something deeper. It might help them eventually recognize the true source of happiness isn't just in the external results. It plants a seed.
Sort of guiding them gently towards a different perspective, even while they pursue their current goals. And the last one, category 6.
This group is described as lacking any clear goal or direction at all. They're driven mainly by fleeting desires, immediate impulses, kind of drifting.
Without much focus or discipline.
Exactly. The text emphasizes the need for them to bring their mind under some kind of guidance, maybe the intellect, and establish some kind of goal, any goal initially to create direction.
Even if it's not the ultimate spiritual goal.
Right. The suggestion is often to start with following established religious practices or rituals. These provide structure, they help regulate the mind and senses.
Discipline through structure.
Yes. And that initial discipline, that purification, can then lead them towards more focused material goals, which builds mental maturity, and eventually that maturity might allow them to even consider the spiritual path later on.
Wow. So it really maps out a progression. It seems the answer to whether action or inaction is better really isn't simple at all. It depends entirely on where someone is on this spectrum of understanding and maturity.
That's precisely it. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer. And this leads directly into the role of karma yoga as a kind of bridge.
A bridge? How so?
Well, the text points out that people who lack wisdom, maybe those in the later categories we discuss, tend to see karma yoga, selfless action, and renunciation, stepping back, as totally separate, maybe even opposing paths.
Right, doing versus not doing.
But the wise, category 1, they see them differently. They understand that both are valid paths leading to the same ultimate realization. They're interconnected.
That's a really key point. The destination is the same. The paths might just look different depending on your starting point.
Exactly right. The text says quite clearly that the state of freedom you can reach through renunciation. You can also reach it through practicing karma yoga. Seeing them as one, as fundamentally aiming for the same thing, is seeing reality correctly.
Okay.
And it adds a practical point. Trying to just stop all action, true renunciation, is actually very difficult, maybe even impossible, if you haven't first done the work of karma yoga, cultivating that detachment, that discipline within action.
It's like you need to learn how to act properly without attachment before you can truly understand non-action.
That's the feeling, yes. It's a necessary preparation. And the text encourages this path, saying that those who stick with karma yoga can reach the ultimate reality Brahman relatively quickly.
And it describes what that karma yogi looks like.
It does. It paints a picture of someone who has gained mastery over their body and senses, whose mind is pure, who sees their own self reflected in all beings.
Wow.
And because of this, they remain untangled, unaffected, even when they're constantly active in the world.
That reminds me of the image used sometimes, the lotus leaf on the water. It's right there in the water, but the water doesn't stick to it.
That's a perfect analogy used in these contexts. Yes.
Yeah.
The karma yogi acts using their body, mind, intellect, senses, but purely for purification, offering the action without getting caught up in the results, without identifying with being the doer of the outcome.
And the payoff for that disciplined, detached action is peace, right? The text contrasts the karma yogi's tranquility with the struggle of those driven by desire.
Yes, exactly. By letting go of the fruits of action, the attachment to the results, the disciplined person finds this deep, abiding peace through karma yoga. In contrast, the undisciplined person, driven by desire for results, remains entangled.
So let's circle back then to that initial question that started us off. Why engage in action if renunciation is superior? Based on this deep dive, the text seems to say, well, superior isn't the right word, perhaps. It depends.
It really does depend. The superiority isn't absolute. It's conditional on the individual's inner state, their spiritual maturity, their level of self-knowledge.
Right, so the key takeaway seems to be, for most people, those still developing wisdom and self-awareness, engaging in action selflessly, that's karma yoga isn't just an option. It's often the necessary path forward.
It's the path towards understanding the true nature of action, and in action, it builds the foundation.
While the wise, who already have that foundation, see the underlying unity no matter what they appear to be doing externally.
Precisely. They see the stillness within the movement.
This really clarifies that seeming contradiction. It reframes action and inaction not as opposites, but maybe as different stages or expressions of the same journey. Now, for you listening, here's something to think about. Reflecting on those 6 categories. Which one feels closest to where you are right now? Just considering that. How might this framework shift how you view your own actions, your efforts, and maybe even what renunciation could mean for you?
It's definitely some food for thought on the path towards, hopefully, a more joyful way of living through this kind of deeper understanding.